The rain was relentless, a heavy downpour that slicked the streets and turned the gutters into rushing streams. But still Mama Chica came, hunched beneath a faded scarf, clutching a bundle of crumpled papers to her chest as if they were the last warm thing she owned. When she pushed open the police station door, the officers barely looked up. They knew her, the poet's mother, the one who came whenever her son, Tund, vanished, which was often. "Madam Chica, he'll turn up," Sergeant Bode said without much interest, leaning back in his chair. "He always does. You know your boy. This time is different." Mama Chica shot back, voice trembling, rainwater sliding down her cheeks like tears. Her hands shook as she opened the papers. Letters, the ink smudged from her grip. "He was warned," she whispered, then read aloud. "Keep both eyes peeled." Bode gave a weary sigh. Probably just some foolish dispute he's gotten himself into again. "Go home, rest. He'll come crawling back when the streets spit him out." But she stood her ground, chest heaving, eyes wild with something more than worry. "No, you don't understand. My son is in danger." Most of the room turned away, their faces already closed. But in the corner, Detective Taye paused mid-paperwork, his gaze flicking to the trembling letters in her hand. He said nothing yet, but he was listening.
Welcome to Echoing Tales, where horror lingers and mysteries whisper. Subscribe for chilling stories, true crime, and the eerie unknown. Now turn down the lights and let's step into the story.
The next morning, the rain had eased, leaving the streets slick and heavy with humidity that clung to the skin. Detective Taye stood outside a small concrete bungalow on the edge of Ajagunal, his shirt already damp. He knocked, and after a pause, Mama Chica opened the door. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her scarf damp and loose from a sleepless night, but her posture was unbowed, her chin lifted with the same quiet determination she had shown in the station the night before. "Detective," she said softly, stepping aside. "You came." Taye nodded, slipping off his shoes before entering the cramped living room. The walls were dotted with old photographs, faded portraits, family gatherings, street snapshots. In several, Tund, younger and mischievous, grinned at the camera, his expression daring, as if the world could never contain him. "I wanted to ask more about your son," Taye began, flipping open his notepad. "Tell me about his friends, his work, where he spends his time." Mama Chica sighed, rubbing her forehead. "Friends? They come and go. Tund, he is not an easy boy. Jobless for some time. He calls himself a street poet, standing in junctions, markets, anywhere a crowd gathers. He speaks from the heart, even if it doesn't bring money. Before that, he had a small office job, filing papers. Lost it because of his mouth, always arguing, always clashing with his boss. One day, they just sent him away for good." She moved to a small table, fingers tracing the worn edges as though touching memories. "Since he was a boy, Tund has been trouble. Thieving, tricking, scheming, anything to get money. But it wasn't always for himself. After his father left, we had nothing. That boy brought home cash however he could. Sometimes honest, sometimes not. It was survival." Taye scribbled notes quietly. "You believe he's in danger now?" "I know it, Detective," Mama Chica said, voice firm but trembling. "Despite all his faults, my son is a good man. Restless, stubborn, loud, yes, but his heart is not wicked." She gestured toward the hallway. "You want to see his room? Maybe it will help you." Taye followed her down the narrow corridor. She pushed open a door to reveal a small, cluttered room. Clothes draped over a chair, food wrappers littered the floor, a cracked mug stuffed with pens sat on the desk near the window, and an open notebook lay on the bed, half filled with scrawled poetry. "This is him," Mama Chica said softly. "Messy, always somewhere in his head." Detective Taye moved slowly through the cramped room, taking in every detail. The chaos of Tund's space matched what Mama Chica had described. Clothes draped over chairs, notebooks spilling onto the floor, scraps of food here and there, a half-eaten sachet of bread tucked under the bed. For most, it would look like the careless mess of a young man with no real responsibility. But Taye knew better. Mess like this could hide secrets, and he had a feeling Tun's chaos was more than just disorder. It was a reflection of a restless mind. He crouched near the bed, scanning the floor, the desk, the corners. Then, in the corner of his eye, he noticed a white edge poking out from beneath the mattress. Something about it drew him closer. His hand reached out cautiously, pulling it free. The paper was crisp, official-looking, and the moment he saw the numbers, his eyebrows rose. 1 million naira. Taye's mind raced. That was not small change, not for a street poet with no steady income. This wasn't a casual debt or a bribe. It was serious. The check was signed, stamped, and included the name of the payer at the bottom. Taye read it twice. Whoever had given this loan was someone Tund must have trusted, or someone with enough power to make a kid like Tund accountable. For a moment, Taye considered the obvious. Loan sharks. That was the first angle that came to mind. Perhaps Tund had taken the money to cover debts he couldn't handle, and now they'd come for him. Kidnapping, intimidation. It made sense, especially given Tund's unpredictable nature. But something in Taye's gut told him it wasn't that simple. The guarantor's name was not a street hustler, not someone connected to petty crime. This was bigger, much bigger. He leaned back against the wall, studying the room once more. Every scrap of paper, every half-finished poem, every discarded wrapper told the story of a boy living on the edge. Tund wasn't reckless for the sake of chaos. He was trying to survive, to express himself, to find a way forward in a city that rarely offered second chances. Taye's mind circled the payor's name again. That would be his next stop. Whoever this person was, they held the key to understanding why Tund needed this cash, and perhaps why he had vanished so suddenly. The check wasn't just money. It was a breadcrumb, leading him straight to the heart of something dangerous, something Tund had stumbled into without realizing the stakes. He stood slowly, slipping the check into an evidence folder, careful not to crease it. The room looked the same as when he'd arrived, but now it carried a new weight, the weight of unanswered questions, of danger that could be closer than anyone suspected. Mama Chica's voice echoed softly from the doorway. "Detective, I found something," Taye said, turning to her. This is serious. I need to follow up on this name. Whoever this payer is, they might know where Tund is." Mama Chica nodded, her face pale but resolute. "Do whatever you must. My son, he's good, detective. He just got into something bigger than himself." Taye tucked the check safely into his folder and nodded. The next move was clear. Find the payer, find the truth, and find Tund before it was too late. Detective Taye stepped out of Tund's small room, the weight of the check heavy in his mind. The name on it had become his immediate focus, the single thread that could unravel the mystery of the boy's disappearance. He moved through the neighborhood, stopping at small shops, chatting with street vendors, even walking the alleys where Tund was known to recite his poetry. Each time, he asked carefully, casually, "Do you know this name? Have you seen this person?" The answers were all the same. Blank stares, shrugs, murmurs that none of them had ever heard of the payer. It didn't make sense. This community was tight-knit. Everyone knew everyone, from the vendors in the corner markets to the boys who ran errands through the streets. Yet no one recognized the name. No one had seen them. Taye frowned. Something about it didn't sit right. If the payer existed, why was there no trace in a place where secrets were rare and gossip abundant? Perhaps the name was false, a smokescreen, a diversion, or someone powerful enough to erase their presence entirely. When that lead dried up, Taye shifted his approach. He asked about Tund himself, hoping the people in the neighborhood could offer insight into his habits, his behavior, his state of mind. The reactions were blunt, often harsh. "Ah, that boy. Always in trouble," one vendor said, shaking his head. "Dirt everywhere he went, always causing arguments, making messes. He's a nice boy sometimes," another added cautiously, "but mostly chaos follows him. Don't even start on the fights he picks." It was the same story over and over. Tund was troublesome, wild, untamed. A lot of people had little good to say about him, but Taye didn't let their dismissals dissuade him. He knew that sometimes the people who were loudest in their judgment overlooked the truth. As he scribbled notes in his pad, a soft voice broke his concentration. "Detective." He looked up to see a woman standing hesitantly at the edge of the crowd. She held herself with quiet composure, her eyes nervous but resolute. I might have some information," she said, her voice low. "I don't know if it will help, but I thought you should know." Taye gestured for her to step aside, and she led him into a quieter room, a small back office tucked behind a weaving shop. He motioned for her to sit as he closed the door and leaned forward, pen ready. "My name is Amara," she began. I knew Tund, not in the ways the others knew him. I was friends with some of his friends, connected to the circles he moved in. I saw things that maybe no one else noticed. Taye listened, keeping his expression neutral but attentive. He was too curious for her own good. Amara continued. He always wanted to understand the government, politics, corruption, things most people wouldn't dare touch. He wasn't malicious. He just wanted to see the truth, to know things he couldn't change. And he tried to, even in small ways, with his poetry, with his words on the street. But one day, something changed. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I don't know how to explain it. He seemed happy, weirdly happy, calm in a way I hadn't seen before. It was like he had found something important, something that mattered enough to him that it changed everything. Taye scribbled quickly in his pad, the sense of anticipation rising. "And you think that's why he's gone?" Amara nodded slowly. "I believe so. Whatever he found, it was dangerous, or at least powerful enough that he had to disappear. Or maybe someone made him disappear because of it." She hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out a laptop. "He used this," she said. "Sometimes I helped him with it. I don't know everything, but maybe the history or files can give you a clue." Taye took the laptop carefully. "Password?" he asked. Amara whispered it, glancing nervously around the room. "He would always use this one. It should get you in." He nodded, slipping the device into his bag. The weight of it in his hands felt heavier than it should, full of potential answers, full of the unknown. Tund's absence had become more than just a missing person case. This was something else, something larger, something that pulsed beneath the surface of Lagos itself. Amara's eyes met his. "Detective, please, be careful." He was curious, yes, but sometimes curiosity in the wrong place brings consequences you can't imagine. Taye nodded solemnly. "I'll handle it," he said, "and I'll find him." He rose, pocketing his notepad and the laptop, and stepped out of the small office. The streets outside were busy with life, hawkers shouting, children weaving through the crowd, the heat clinging to every surface. But Taye's mind was elsewhere, locked on the name of the payer, the clues hidden in Tund's history, and now the mysterious laptop that might finally reveal the truth. The detective knew one thing for certain. Tund had stumbled onto something bigger than himself. And if he didn't act quickly, that discovery might be the last thing the boy ever did. Next morning, Detective Taye returned to his small office and placed the laptop on his desk, the city hum outside fading into background noise. He entered the password Amara had given him, and the screen lit up with folders, bookmarks, and browsing history, a digital map of Tund's relentless curiosity. He scrolled through searches on government websites, obscure blogs, and shadowy forums, the boy's thirst for knowledge apparent in every line. Then Taye's eyes caught a link Tund had repeatedly visited. Clicking it, he froze. The page was a news article he had never seen before, a hidden corner of the internet. It was about Minister Adewale Okoro, a well-respected government official, happily married for over 30 years. The article revealed a secret affair and a daughter born from it, a child only 9 at the time of the report. The story was 6 years old but still intact, preserved in the shadows of cyberspace. Scrolling further, Taye noticed something that made his heart skip a beat. The name of the guarantor on the loan check appeared in the article, and there was a YouTube link attached. Clicking it, Taye saw a video of one of Adewale Okoro's old friends recounting the nickname the minister had used as a child. The pieces were beginning to click. If this secret were ever exposed, Okoro's career would be destroyed, his marriage ruined, his life public property. The motive was glaringly clear. But motive alone was not enough. Opportunity, means, that was what Taye needed next. He thought of Tund, restless, curious, fearless. The boy had discovered something that powerful people would do anything to protect. Taye grabbed his bag and returned to Mama Chica's home, navigating the familiar streets of Ajagunal with a sense of urgency. Inside, the bungalow felt smaller, quieter, pressing down on him as he began to search once more. His eyes scanned every corner, every scrap of paper, until they landed on the calendar pinned to the wall near Tund's desk. Most days were covered with scribbles, mundane reminders. Then he saw it. A note, simple but direct. Meet. The same name listed as the payer on the check. Taye felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. This wasn't a coincidence. Tund had deliberately written it, marking a meeting he had planned, a meeting that could lead straight to the person holding the keys to his disappearance. The detective examined the room one last time. The clutter, the clothes draped over chairs, the half-empty mug on the desk, each ordinary object now laden with significance. Tund's curiosity had brought him here, into a web of secrets far larger than anyone had imagined. Taye tucked the calendar under his arm, his jaw tightening. The next step was clear. Track down the person behind the check, confront the meeting Tund had scheduled, and unravel the dangerous truth of what he had discovered about Minister Adewale Okoro. Every instinct screamed that it would be perilous, yet retreat was not an option. Tund's trail was still warm, and now it led straight to a man whose secrets could ruin everything. Detective Taye stepped into the narrow alley, the walls closing in on either side like they were pressing the secrets of the city into him. It was compact, almost claustrophobic, with shadows pooling in every corner and no cameras in sight. The perfect place to carry out a crime and vanish without trace. The ground was slick with grime, the scent of refuse thick in the humid air. Taye moved slowly, eyes scanning every inch of the alley. Nothing. No sign of a struggle. No blood. No discarded weapon. It was as if Tund had simply disappeared. Frustration gnawed at him, but then something caught the corner of his eye, glinting faintly in the dim light. He crouched and picked it up. A pocket watch. Small, gold-edged, and worn. Opening it, Taye's breath caught. Inside was a picture, a photograph of Tund and Mama Chica, smiling, frozen in a quiet, private moment. This belonged to the boy. He had carried it everywhere. The watch rested atop a drain, wide enough, Taye noted, for a person to slip inside. He crouched, peering down into the darkness, trying to see where it led. The faint echo of dripping water answered him, a low, hollow sound that made his stomach tighten. Pulling out his phone, Taye called the station. "Detective Taye," he said, voice low but urgent. "I found something. It's serious. I need backup now." There was a pause, then a skeptical voice. "Taye, what is it? Are you sure? These streets, these boys, you know the type. Sometimes you're chasing shadows." "This isn't a shadow," Taye pressed. "It's real. Evidence. The computer, the friend, the government official, the conspiracy. I need someone to follow me. This is urgent." Reluctantly, they told him to come in. At the station, he laid it all out. The laptop with Tund's research, Amara's testimony, Minister Adewale Okoro, the loan check, the mysterious guarantor, every piece of the puzzle. The officers listened, faces tight with skepticism, whispers of disbelief. "Detective," one said finally, leaning back, arms crossed. "Mama Chica's son, he's troubled, yes. But sane? Mentally all right? He's always chasing these impossible things." Taye's jaw tightened. "I'm asking for one chance. Just one. Follow me. Let me show you what I found." After a long pause, they muttered reluctantly, "Okay, one chance. Just this once." Taye returned to the alley with two uniformed officers in tow, the air tense with anticipation. He pointed to the drain. "Here. This is where it starts." The officers peered into the darkness, hesitation written on their faces. The opening seemed to swallow the faint light of the street lamps, a yawning void beneath the city. Taye handed them flashlights, checking his own before crouching down and slipping inside. The drainage tunnel was tight, damp, and smelled of decay. Water ran along the edges, shallow but cold, making every step slippery. He moved slowly, shining the beam across the walls, following the faint scent of earth and metal. Somewhere deeper, a faint sound, a scrape, a drip, a shuffle, caught his attention. "Stay close," he murmured, voice low but commanding. The officers followed, their lights trembling in the shadows. Taye's mind raced. Tun's trail had led here, into the darkness beneath the city, and whatever was waiting below had been waiting for him too. The pocket watch, the drain, the secrecy of the alley, it all pointed to something deliberate, something calculated. And now, as they pressed further into the tunnel, Taye knew one thing for certain. They were no longer chasing a missing boy. They were stepping into a conspiracy that had reached further than anyone dared imagine. The darkness ahead swallowed them whole, the city above fading until all that remained was the narrow passage, the echo of dripping water, and the heartbeat of a detective determined to find the truth, and the boy he had promised to bring home. The drainage tunnel reeked of rot and stagnant water, the walls slick and slimy under Detective Taye's gloves. Light filtered in through occasional grates above, casting long, narrow beams that barely illuminated the narrow path. Every step was treacherous, water sloshing around his boots, the echoes of dripping liquid and distant scurrying making the air feel alive, menacing. The officers flinched at every sound, but Taye pressed on, driven by the urgency of finding Tund. Minutes stretched into tense silence, until, faint at first, a voice cut through the darkness. "Help! Somebody help me!" Taye froze, heart hammering. "There! That's him!" he shouted, motioning the officers to follow. The echoes of Tund's cries guided them deeper, the narrow tunnel twisting and turning as if trying to hide its secrets. Then, in a small opening tucked between two drains, they saw him. Tund, bedraggled, exhausted, but alive, his face streaked with dirt and sweat. Relief washed over Taye. "Call the station," he barked. "We have him." Within minutes, backup arrived. Tund was carefully lifted out of the drain, shivering and weak but conscious. Paramedics hurried him to a nearby hospital, Mama Chica following close behind, tears streaming down her face. For hours, she sat in the hospital waiting room, wringing her hands, murmuring prayers, until finally a doctor emerged. "He's stable," the doctor said, "just dehydrated and exhausted. With some rest, he'll recover fully." Mama Chica collapsed into a chair, overcome with relief. Taye remained close, watching over Tund's recovery, but his mind was already on the next step, the fallout from what Tund had uncovered. Within hours, officers were dispatched to Minister Adewale Okoro's residence. The theory was clear: motive, opportunity, and the links uncovered by Tund's research pointed straight to him. But when they arrived, the house was eerily silent. No car in the driveway, no voices, only a simple note left on the polished front desk. "I did what I had to." His wife gone, the children gone, the closets emptied of clothes and belongings. Adewale Okoro, a man of decades of public scrutiny and power, had vanished as completely as Tund had temporarily. The weight of the conspiracy was palpable. A figure who had once held immense influence now reduced to a shadow, leaving the city and its systems to wrestle with the aftermath. Days passed. Tund remained in the hospital, gradually regaining strength. His room was now filled with flowers, gifts, and the occasional visitor who wanted to see the boy who had uncovered so much. Mama Chica refused to leave his side, sitting in the chair beside his bed, her hand gently resting on his arm, tears of gratitude streaking her face. "He's back," she whispered repeatedly to herself, voice shaking. "My boy, he's back." Taye stood quietly in the corner, observing the reunion. The case had taken twists he hadn't anticipated, moving from the back alleys of Ajagunal to the highest corridors of power. But for now, Tund was safe, and that was what mattered most. Outside the hospital, the city carried on, unaware of the secrets that had nearly torn a family apart and exposed the fragile veneer of a government official's life. Adewale Okoro remained missing, the authorities unsure if he would ever be found. His disappearance left questions unanswered, rumors swirling, and a silence that stretched over the city like a warning. Some secrets, once uncovered, have consequences too powerful to predict. For Mama Chica, the relief was immediate and profound. For Detective Taye, the case was far from over, the threads of conspiracy still tangled in shadows. But at least for now, the boy, Tund, was home. Thank you for watching Echoing Tales. Subscribe, ring the bell, like and share. Stay tuned, because the next mystery is already calling.